Welcome to Angman Entertainment. Absolutely a privilege to get to meet you.
Same here.
How are you? And how's the other members of the band?
Well, I think we're all, we're in a good way. We are all on our way to Finland actually now. So I'm waiting for the guitarist to come to my place, and we are going to the airport later. And busy,
brilliant.
But that's great.
We'll talk about touring and all that in a bit. And can I take you all the way back to the beginning? I can see you've got some Iron Maiden posters up. What music did you grow up listening to?
What bands I was listening to? Well, it was mainly Iron Maiden because that's always been my favorite band. I was starting off when I was really, really young. I was listening to some Swedish, prog records that I got hold of. But that was just because it was the heaviest stuff I could ever heard back in the days. And then I got into, the stuff that most youngsters were listening to at the time, like Kiss and stuff like that. And from there on, I developed into the, like Iron Maiden, Merciful Fate, all that kind of stuff. And it developed all the time. But I never, lost interest in heavy metal like many other people in, like in my age, or, they abandoned all their old heroes, like Saxon and stuff like that, as soon as they heard something like Metallica or whatever, But I've always been stuck with the heavy metal. I've never seen any reason not to, listen to both heavy metal and more brutal stuff.
With growing up, when did you first want to become a musician, singer, form a band? Was it because of your love of heavy metal music?
Yeah, sure. It was like I was so much into the metal scene, and the tape trading stuff, everything, and it was kind of like a natural thing to start thinking of forming your own band, more or less. And in Sweden there is so many bands all over, so it's not like it's not a big thing, to start a band. Everyone has one, more or less.
Let's go into the death metal scene. Back in the day when you first became prominent in the death metal scene, what was the death metal underground vibe? What was it like back in those days?
Well, I lived quite far away from, cities and stuff like that. So I never really met anyone more than, occasionally if I was, like at some, if I traveled to Stockholm or something, it was like you have to drive for 6-7 hours, to get there, so it wasn't every day really. But I had some good contacts anyway where I lived, and I think it was quite good. I thought back in the days that it sucked, but when I look back at it now, it was probably quite good anyway.
Yeah. Was the Swedish death metal scene anything like the Norwegian death metal scene with the exploits they got up to?
Sorry, what was the last you said there?
What was the Swedish death metal scene? Was it like the death metal scene in Norway? Was it aggressive and brutal at the same time?
Yeah, well, I lived quite close to the border of Norway, so I was more in, I got into the scene, like where bands like Dissection from Sweden, and it was not far away, a place called Sarpsborg, where that Slayer mag from Norway and all black metal guys were. So I was more hanging out in that region. So yeah, it was quite aggressive, I must say.
You like I was born in 1974, so all of that scene and all the bands which you've mentioned, I grew up listening to, Merciful Fate, Venom, and I always had a fascination because you read books, you see stories about what was going on back in that period, and having the opportunity to speak to someone who was around that scene is fascinating for myself.
Yeah, all right, cool. Yeah,
Um,
I was kind of involved. I was pretty much involved in all the stuff that was going on there back in the day. So yeah.
chucking the pigs' heads into the crowd and all that.
A lot of things happened.
Did you ever get to meet the guys from Mayhem and what they got up to?
Yeah. You mean back in the days or later? Back in the days, I went to the record store, HellButcher, the record store, and I met, Euronymous there, and I think it was some more. But it was just like I was a normal customer at the store, so I wouldn't say that I had a really, like connection in that sense. But my friend June from Dissection, he was good friends with them, and he actually sent the demo tape to Euronymous, the Unholy Death tape that we did with Niflame. So, but then everything, turned like to shit or whatever.
It kind of went off the rails a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And then I was very good friends. I was good friends with the guy called Occultus that was singing in Mayhem for a short while. I knew him a bit, and Metallion I knew well. The guy from Slayer Mag. Yeah, so those were my friends. Back in the days.
Absolutely amazing. I could talk about that all night because I just loved it. I remember opening a Kerrang magazine, and on the front cover there was a burning church, and they had done an interview with Anonymous, and it's like, wow. In the UK we don't get anything like that. So
you have got Iron Maiden here.
How did the new band come about?
Yeah, well, it was like it was like arguments all the time in Niflheim, and they became worse and worse and worse. I had, like songs that I wanted to record. We recorded a new album in 2019 that never, it never came out because some absolutely stupid reasons I don't even understand or know myself. But I was a little bit, thinking, I'm not getting younger really, and I've got a lot of ideas and stuff that I want to do. And if I'm going to do that in the pace of Niflheim, where we release an album every 10 years or so, next time, it's time for another album, and I have some song ideas, I will be like 100 years old or something, I thought like, I can't take it anymore, I'm gonna form my own band and continue in the whatever pace I like to do it, So,
I listened to the album today. I went on to my Hilux and I listened to it, and I was like, "Fuck, this is good. This is
cool,
good."
thanks.
Yeah, it's I haven't read my review yet, but I love all that kind of music. So I was listening to it and I thought, "Fuck, this is good." So I'm looking forward to sharing my views on it, but I think it'd be up towards the top.
That sounds terrific.
The new album, like I said, I listened to it today. What was the recording and writing process for yourself, or how do you go about recording your style of album?
Yeah, well, this was a bit different to what I'm used to, but it is because of the fact that we live far away from each other, all band members. So I started to do demo tapes, but I'm not really a guitarist, really, or bass player. I can play a little bit, but it doesn't sound very good. And so I did, the groundwork or whatever, and then I invited my guitarist, a guy called Necrophiliac. He came down, and he played guitars, and we finished up the songs in a proper way. And when we had the songs recorded so you could hear what was going on, then we just sent it to the other guys in the band, and so they could learn the songs, and maybe if they wanted to add something or whatever, and then we went up to the drummer, Devastator. He has his own studio thing, drum studio. It's actually an old concert hall.
All right.
Yeah, so it's a huge place, and we recorded all the stuff, all the drums there. Because of the big room, it gets a natural reverb to it a little bit, and we tried to get that natural sound to the drums, and it turned out to be really good, in my opinion, the drum sound. So
it's a brilliant album, really, really is. It's when this opportunity came about for myself to be able to speak to you and interview you, I always like to have a listen to the music prior to it. So when a new band is formed or new material, it's always, for me, I like to listen to it to see my vibe on the album. And it's brilliant. It's really, really good. And I am looking forward to, hopefully, I'll come into it in a minute, to hearing these songs live.
Yeah. To hear the songs live,
yeah. That's in the studio and all that. It's when you listen to something live, it hits you there.
Yeah, exactly. It's a different thing here, really.
Yeah,
I agree totally. That's the real deal when you listen to it live. So we have already been playing a few gigs, and actually the album, the limited edition, both CD and vinyl version, have a bonus DVD that we recorded from our first concert. So it's gonna be the whole album live, even if it's not perfect. It was the first gig ever, but
oh
still,
my God.
that's why we did it, just because, just like you say, so you can get the live vibe of the band, really.
I'll have to order that to just listen to the songs live, because it's you can listen to an album and you take everything in, but it's when you've got the atmosphere, as you know, with the crowd all getting behind it. And when I used to be in a band, the one thing which I always fed off was the energy coming from the actual crowd. So people go, when I speak to other bands, it's like, oh, it's every concert is like the same, but it's not. Not every concert is the same because of the fans.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, myself, I go to a lot of concerts, the same concert day after day, with my favorite bands, but it's not the same concert, really. It's the same songs, but it's a totally different vibe every day, and
it's the energy which flows through it. Like I
Exactly.
do concert photography now, and I put as much into photographing as what I would have done playing, because it's like you're part of something, and it's
Yeah, exactly.
um you you mentioned about you've done a couple of gigs. Going forward, touring the album. Have you made plans for the rest of 2024?
Yeah, well, we are adding stuff all the time, as time, as we get the opportunities to play at some place, we will do it. But as far as 24, as I know right now, we have 3 gigs before the actual album comes out.
Right.
There is 1 gig tomorrow, actually, in Finland,
Right.
and then after that, next week, it's in a place called Uddevalla in Sweden. And the next weekend after that, there's another festival called Muskelrock in Sweden, where we're gonna play as well. And that's
All
the
right.
same day as that's also the release date of the album. So it's gonna
Anything
be some kind
planned
of
for afterwards?
special thing.
Yeah. Anything planned for after the release?
Yeah,
Festival wise, or
yeah, we just started working with this company called Doomstar that book concerts and stuff. So he have sent me a ton of different gigs, but
yeah.
we haven't booked really much yet. I don't want to say too much before everything is settled, but there will be a lot of gigs coming for sure, definitely.
Absolutely.
And
Brilliant.
I have another, like four dates in Sweden in November, October and November, in the end there. And we have a Swedish tour, that I put together with some other guy, and it's gonna be like a headline, with a lot of stage things going on, fire and
Oh, amazing. Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Finally, will us in the UK get to listen to Hellhammer in the near future?
I hope so. If we get any, offer from any concert place, we will definitely go there. I promise you that.
That's absolutely brilliant. I can't wait. I really, really can't wait. This has been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Good luck with the album. You don't need luck. The album is awesome. So
thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope to see you in the UK very, very soon.
Cool. I will show up sooner or later, for sure.
Brilliant. That's what I like to hear. Okay, thank you for this, John.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.